Is your community just not what it used to be? Today's story will unveil the secret difference maker that can save your community. Watch until the end to learn the moral of this story. In the small town of Maplewood, life moved at a leisurely pace. Neighbors knew each other by name, and community events were the heart of social life. Among the residents was Mrs. Thompson, a kind-hearted widow who lived alone in a modest house near the town square. One chilly autumn morning, as Mrs. Thompson was tending to her garden, she noticed a scruffy stray dog limping down the street. The dog looked tired and hungry, its ribs visible through its thin coat. Mrs. Thompson's heart went out to the poor creature. She approached the dog slowly, offering her hand for it to sniff. The dog, wary but desperate, hesitated before gently nuzzling her hand. Mrs. Thompson smiled and led the dog to her porch, where she gave it some food and water. She made a makeshift bed from old blankets and decided to call the dog Lucky. Lucky stayed on Mrs. Thompson's porch, and over the next few days, she took care of him. She bathed him, fed him, and even took him to the vet. Lucky's condition improved, and he grew more affectionate towards Mrs. Thompson. The neighbors noticed her acts of kindness and commended her for taking in the stray dog. One of her neighbors, Mr. Jenkins, was particularly impressed. He was a wealthy businessman, known for his stern demeanor. Despite his success, Mr. Jenkins was often seen as unapproachable. However, he had a soft spot for animals, which few people knew about. Inspired by Mrs. Thompson's kindness, Mr. Jenkins decided to contribute to the community. He donated a substantial amount of money to the local animal shelter, ensuring that other stray animals could receive care and find homes. The shelter, which had been struggling to stay afloat, was revitalized by his generosity. News of Mr. Jenkins' donation spread through Maplewood, and it sparked a wave of goodwill. Residents who had once been indifferent to the stray animals began volunteering at the shelter. They donated food, blankets, and toys, and some even adopted pets of their own. Lucky, now healthy and happy, became a symbol of the community's compassion. Mrs. Thompson's small act of kindness had set off a chain reaction, transforming the way the town cared for its animals. The animal shelter thrived, and the number of stray animals on the streets decreased significantly. One sunny afternoon, the town held a fair to celebrate the community's efforts. There were games, food stalls, and a special area where the shelter showcased animals available for adoption. Lucky, with a shiny new collar, was the guest of honor. Children petted him, and adults admired how far he had come. As Mrs. Thompson walked through the fair, she was approached by Mr. Jenkins. He smiled warmly and said, "Your kindness towards Lucky has inspired us all, Mrs. Thompson. You've shown us that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted." Mrs. Thompson blushed, humbled by the praise. "I only did what I thought was right," she replied. "I never imagined it would make such a difference." Mr. Jenkins nodded. "It's often the small, simple acts of kindness that create the biggest ripples. You've reminded us all of that." The fair ended with a sense of unity and purpose. The residents of Maplewood had come together, driven by a shared spirit of compassion and generosity. Lucky's story became a cherished part of the town's history, a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, always has the power to make a big impact. And so Maplewood continued to thrive, its heart warmed by the simple truth that every act of kindness, no matter how small, is never wasted. The moral of the story is, no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. Thank you for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe so we can produce more stories like this one.